At Charlestown Library, Mike Whitney was calling it as he saw it. The former international cricketer touched on fitness, drugs, alcohol and sport. Whitney believes it's important for teenagers to form a clear opinion on these issues as they begin to decide on their future.
Living in the 1990s is extremely tough, and to be healthy in mind and body is a very important thing because there's a lot of stress in the world now.
His down-to-earth approach proved a success in maintaining the attention of the Year 10 and 11 students from Cardiff and Gateshead High Schools.
Do you see yourself as a role model?
In some areas, I suppose, yeah, I would like to think so. I think particularly in cricket, and one of the great things about my career is that I always try to keep myself fit and healthy to stay on the paddock.
In his cricket career, while respected for his form with the bat, it's Whitney's bowling prowess and his wicket tally of more than 800 that's made him a household name. Involvement in sport, Whitney says, has helped him realise the benefits of a healthy lifestyle.
It's given me the opportunity to travel the world and look at other places and come back to Australia and think, God, how lucky are we, and just the opportunity we have to be able to live a healthy lifestyle.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Newcastle is almost a commando training base for divers. It turns out a crack squad, but they train from the boards in whistling winds and plunge into unheated water. In the long run, many give up through winter and leave the sport. Others, from an early age and with family 100% behind them, relocate to training centres in Sydney. Many are then poached by the Institute of Sport. A squad of 6 ranging in age from 12 to 18 is set to compete in the National Junior Championships in Perth at the end of the month. But for now they train 6 days a week for 2 hours each session. The weather was kind to Dungog and the organisers of the annual rodeo held in benefit of the Heart Foundation. 224 riders registered for the camp draft event, the idea being to cut a beast out from the yards, then manoeuvre it through a tight figure-8 pattern and 2 obstacles resembling gates.
Bring him back round the second peg. Going nicely here so far for him. Now he takes him down towards the gate. Looking for the gate, Chris Edwards from over here at Stroud, riding his Palomino horse Echo, and straight through the gate. That's where you've got to put them.
The rodeo attracts competitors from throughout the Hunter, North Coast and New England, but it's the brave and the bulletproof who go in for the bull riding. After a few minutes of composure, these cowboys are flung into the ride of their lives. And spare a thought for the rodeo clowns. They've got nothing but a stripy set of strides, separating them from the lashing bulk of an angry bull once the riders come off. "35 athletes from the Hunter and the Central Coast competed in the regional track and field carnival, all vying for places in the New South Wales state team headed for competition in Narrabeen next month. Some will also make it to the Special Olympics National Games in Perth at the end of the year. The athletes put their all into the short and long distance sprints, the long jump, high jump, relays and shot put. Sportsmanship is alive, well and beaming on the faces of those who climb onto the winning blocks.
I like to see everyone get out and try, and you have some that are never ever going to beat some of the top athletes, yet they should have an equal chance. And in Special Olympics, everyone has an equal chance. One has an equal chance.
Singleton Army Camp was turned into a battlefield yesterday for the rare operation. The mission was to treat injured soldiers and deliver them safely to a helicopter. It was as close as you could get to the real thing, with the casualties coming complete with tomato sauce and simulated symptoms of various injuries. The soldiers from the 2nd Division had to make a diagnosis of the patient's condition and then treat it accordingly. It was then into the ambulance for a bumpy ride to the awaiting choppers. Like sardines in a tin, the injured officers were crammed into the aircraft. It was mission complete as the chopper took off with the patients safely on their way to a hospital. 13 Army units were involved in Operation Dust Off Dawn, including the Aviation Regiment, field hospitals, ambulances, transport and infantry. The Army will review its policy on medical evacuations following improved techniques used in yesterday's exercise. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News.
Lake Watch has gathered 3,000 signatures from people calling for a ban on commercial netting of fish in the lake. The group claims the lake has been netted to near extinction. But commercial fishermen are just as concerned as anyone and were well represented at a meeting held at Morisset last night. The Department of Fisheries does not have statistical information to support claims of decreasing fish stocks in the lake. Old-timers, the young, recreational anglers, residents, local and state government officials and business people were also at the meeting, recognising growing community concern. Some pointed the finger at pollution, urban runoff and sedimentation, for what all could agree were signs of the lake being under environmental stress. Another meeting is to be held next month.
The sexual assault and murder of 85-year-old Margaret Howlett has Singleton's 12,000 residents worried. It's the second vicious killing in the town in less than a year. The Deputy Mayor of Singleton, Nolene Fraser, says the murder of Mrs Howlett has exposed the fears townspeople have felt for some time.
The murder of Mrs Howlett a few weeks ago has really unnerved a lot of the elderly people in Singleton. We do seem to have a lot of ladies living on their own, and some of them are quite beside themselves.
What's the use of having police if you go to the police station and there's nobody there?
Council voted last night to approach the Minister for Police to get 4 more officers and a 24-hour-a-day service. But for some locals, the current police presence is enough, with 26 officers and the station open from 7 a.m. to midnight during the week and round the clock on Friday and Saturday.
There's never been a lot of crime. I've been here 10 years and I've never known any real crime to have someone on call for 24 hours.
Singleton staff levels will be one less worry for outgoing Chief Superintendent of the Upper Hunter, Rick Kane. Mr Kane says he's had enough after 40 years in the service and feels the time is right to retire.
We're now back to where we started. We've got a police service full of honest police. The institutionalised corruption is gone.
He handed the reins of law and order to former boss of the Mid-North Coast, Ian Campbell, who's promised to target specific problem areas to make the district safer for all.
Particularly road trauma, break-in and steal from dwellings, assaults, domestic violence and of course sexual assaults on children is one of the things that I'll be particularly aiming at.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
For Black South Africans, next week's vote is a chance to exercise democratic rights for the first time in the country's history. In the lead-up to the polls, media campaigns have dominated the airwaves, election trucks spreading the word as they travel around thousands of villages. Decades of racial tension have resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. It's hoped a new government may change that, and South Africa's church leaders have called for calm, peace and worldwide prayer.
The churches of all denominations in the world have been asked by the leaders of the church in South Africa to really this Sunday pray for all the peoples of South Africa, both white and coloured, and to pray that there will be peace and unity in that very troubled and divided nation.
This weekend, Newcastle's Christchurch Cathedral has set apart a special chapel.
Prayer is, we think, one of the great ways of both asking God for His guidance upon the people of that country, and also it's a tremendous unifying force between people.
As the election draws near, the Church believes it can make a positive contribution.
Much of our thought and prayer is directed this weekend not only that the democratic process will be successful, but that there will be a growing respect for the dignity of human life.
Since the first school at Barnsley opened in the early 1900s, the suburb and the number of students have steadily grown. But according to the principal, lack of forward planning has caused problems for staff and 430 pupils.
The result has been that drainage problems have made themselves very, very noticeable over the years, and there is indeed a need for better facilities for the kids at Barnsley.
Plans to build a new primary school were first floated 20 years ago, and just down the road in Cliffbrook Street they're taking shape.
10 permanent classrooms and 4 new demountables, a hall, library, canteen, covered area, walkways from classrooms to classrooms. In fact, it will be indeed a facility that will be the envy of most schools in the area.
The total project will cost $2.6 million, the completion date set for the end of the year.
It will be very, very close to handing over to the department, and I am absolutely confident that it will be occupied at the beginning of 1995 school year.
The current New South Wales adverse possession law was created in 1969, but has largely remained dormant. But a recent Tasmanian case has focused attention on the law and its ramifications. The man who'd grazed cattle on his neighbour's allotment for 19 years claimed he owned the land under the adverse possession law. The court agreed and he won the case along with the 5 hectares. The law states any land occupied by a trespasser for 12 years or more without complaint from the owner becomes the property of the trespasser. This applies to Torres title or registered land only when the whole block is occupied. But for the 3% of the state that is old system land, only a part of the block has to be occupied, whether it be a fence, a part of a building or livestock, for a trespasser to claim it after 12 years, which makes Newcastle one of the most vulnerable areas in the state.
Newcastle's unusual in that there is a greater proportion of old system land in Newcastle than elsewhere in the state.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Unfortunately, do you have it? Hammer is the story of a girl raped by her boyfriend and the ensuing court case. Exploring male attitudes to women, it's a surreal work featuring cross-gender casting.
Mary, could you please tell the court what happened on the night in question? I was raped by him.
Objection, Your Honour. Sourage is also written from a feminist perspective, a piece focusing on the reactions of the friends and family of Charlotte, a girl suffering anorexia nervosa.
Charlotte! It's Charlotte! It's Charlotte! It's Charlotte!
Both plays premiere tomorrow night at the Community Arts Centre in Parry Street, Hamilton.
A development application has been put to council by the syndicate of Newcastle businessmen who bought the 11,000 square metre property. It is one of the biggest developments ever seen in Hamilton and was designed by architects Killen and Doran.
We're looking at around about 47 townhouse style of units that are going in groups of 7 buildings, of which there are groups of 2 units, 3 units, 4, right up to a group of 8 units.
Hamilton Bus Depot will be cut in half when building begins on the units. The land, bought for $1 million, is bounded by Denison and Lawson Streets. The depot's tennis court will be incorporated into the design, together with a new swimming pool, gymnasium and games room.
We felt that it was important to improve the quality of lifestyle as well, and not to sort of turn it into a ghetto, but to keep it as we feel that it'll be an important part of Newcastle's development.
The land is now being rezoned to residential by council, and if the development application is approved, work could begin as soon as August, with the first residents moving in by Christmas. Jason Jornhoff, NBN News. The mangled metal mess was lifted by helicopter from Hexham Swamp this afternoon, where Leith Compton had ended up. The crash site was just 100 metres from the airfield, but the Wyong pilot said his gyrocopter was plummeting to the ground so fast he could not make it that far. He crawled from the wreckage and walked more than 2 kilometres through swampland to Mitre 10 Soccer Stadium for help. A greenkeeper was the first to spot the 42-year-old.
This chap was walking down the hill with a helmet in his hand. And I thought at first he must have been a bike or someone over there got hurt or something, but then he said he looking for a telephone because he'd crashed his chopper. So I took him into the club and they rang the emergency services.
Mr Compton has been flying his $6,000 gyrocopter for more than 5 years. He was doing circuit training in the sky above Newcastle today with 2 other flying friends, as he has hundreds of times before. But the compact, homemade aircraft wouldn't cooperate this time, leaving him powerless at 50 metres above ground.
Well, he just said that the engine cut out and just wouldn't fly, and he looked for a place to land. He said either land in the swamp, or so he looked for a little piece of patch of ground and he found it and brought it down on that. But he said it's a total wreck, it's a write-off.
The Civil Aviation Authority will investigate the incident. The classic Windjill aeroplane has gained the respect of RAF pilots since its inception in 1955. It was used mainly as a training aircraft but saw action in Vietnam. Its role there was to locate the enemy and let off a stream of smoke so the army would know where to find them. A former RAF pilot was at Williamtown to say goodbye to the plane.
Well, it was very good, seeing it originally was designed to replace the Tiger Moth as a basic trainer, a role which it carried out extremely well.
2 new PC-9s arrived from Western Australia today for their new home at Williamtown. Another 3 are expected within the next year as the Windjills are sold to museums or collectors.
Everything is computer controlled, radios, navigation equipment, flight controls, instrumentation. Everything is new about it. Far more powerful and an aircraft with far greater capacities, speed, etc.
I saw you sitting in the cockpit of the new PC-9 earlier on. Do you think you could fly the PC-9?
Well, not immediately, but give them 10 minutes, I'd have a go.
The Knights skipper and powerhouse front rower Mark Sargent is back in the side after 3 weeks out with a knee injury, and he's champing at the bit to get into action. Sarge's bursts through the centre have been missed, but it seems unlikely he'll be able to play the full 80 minutes on Sunday after his layoff.
You always lose a bit of match fitness when you're out injured. If conditions are like they were last Sunday, it's going to be pretty warm as well, which might take a bit of sting out of him.
Also back in the team, Russell Wire. He was doubtful with ankle problems. His presence will be welcome up against tough Steelers centre Brett Broadwell. It's a pressure game for both sides, floundering near the bottom of the table. They can't afford to lose too many more from here.
Right, last week we'd lost 4 in a row. Now, it was good to break that losing streak, but I mean, you've got to start putting wins together if you're going to be any threat for the semi-finals.
Like an Army Sergeant Major. Okay, then we'll do whatever you do to get over it, and after that, when I say, let's go, you're out, you give it everything you've got.
This $260,000 American designed and built machine could help dramatically reduce the cost of injuries to the coal industry.
Well, the total cost of injuries is about $40 million per year, of which falling objects cost us, in round figures, around about 10%. So that's around about $4 million. That's just in New South Wales alone.
Joint Coal Board Chief Ian Farrer was at today's commissioning of the new mechanical testing system. The computer-aided device is designed to help discover the reasons behind sudden roof failures in coal mines, testing rock properties, in particular their weaknesses.
From our perspective, what it's likely to do is to more accurately predict potential faults in roof strata, to enable miners to be able to take precautionary action to make sure or minimise the risk of any falling debris.
The machine, housed at the university's Institute of Coal Research Centre, is the only one of its kind in Australia and will advance past methods of measuring the strength of rock.
We need to have a more scientific base behind predicting just what is likely to happen, and hopefully that will come out with machines like the one we've seen here today.
Like many institutions, the state's TAFE system has come under fierce criticism.
I think in the past TAFE has been a very slow-moving bureaucracy, but it emphasised public service, and I think often we tend to forget about that.
Director of the Hunter Institute of Technology, Dick Jordan, was guest speaker at today's Business Club luncheon. He believes a number of misconceptions have dogged TAFE's operations. One common myth is that the system is the only provider of vocational education, another that it operates under bureaucratic and inflexible guidelines.
We're there to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity, and we're very proud of our emphasis on equal opportunity no matter where it occurs. And sometimes that means we have to be slower than a strictly commercial enterprise.
With a number of major projects underway this year, the Hunter Institute of Technology caters for 46,000 students spread across 30 locations.
Well, it's one of the biggest and most varied. We're the third largest in the state, and the New South Wales institutes are in fact bigger than their comparisons in other states.
The recently released report by a Sydney-based consultancy firm makes a number of recommendations. One major concern identified was the need to link the mall to the foreshore. The study proposes 2 ground-level pedestrian crossings over the rail line at Perkins and Market Streets. Another proposal is to allow service vehicles to use the mall, but raise pavements for pedestrians. It's a $7 million project and council is being pushed to provide its share.
what's happening is that the City Centre Committee is saying to Council, we'd like you to include $1 million in this budget that we're formulating now, which has to be completed by the end of June, so that we can get on and do some of this work.
Councillor Tate believes in time the study will gain civic backing, but not before the public has its say.
We shouldn't do it in such a fashion that we're not prepared, and I really think the way that should occur is for people to be able to get hold of the report, read it, understand what it is, and then put their submissions to Council.
Newcastle City Council approved this escort agency 111 in Maitland Road, Islington 2 weeks ago. It was the first such premises given the green light by Council in 18 months. This afternoon they inspected the building.
The inspection was called for by the people that are not sure what's happening in this industry. There certainly are a lot of problems at the moment, and whether this is an escort agency or whether it is a brothel is the question.
Approval of the Islington business was granted a month after police raids on several inner-city brothels, which saw about 20 people charged with various prostitution offences.
Hastings Council has been asking for some time for face-to-face talks with Education Minister Chadwick, but today's meeting with Mr Bull went part of the way to alleviating concerns. One particular point of discussion was the urgent need for a new school to be established at Tacking Point.
It has a very, very high priority within the government, and once the budget announcement is made, then construction should proceed immediately.
Although subject to approval in the September budget, Mr Bull expressed confidence it will go ahead. The other main concern thrashed out was the overcrowding at the Hastings Primary School, which was built in 1981 to cater for 450 pupils, but now has 750. Some taught in demountables, which are restricting playground space. Others hold classes in corridors.
We will act to make sure that children aren't out in under trees or in the corridors or anywhere else other than in a classroom situation.
Mr Bull also acknowledged the urgent need for a high school to serve the Camden Haven Kendall area, with a site already chosen for a new complex.
There will be a new high school down there. That will be part of the ongoing budget process for the following year. It won't be in this year, but we hopefully it'll be in the next year. And we'll need a new high school, and we'll get a new high school down there, complete with a distance education centre, which we'll be transferring down there.
The Roads and Traffic Authority is planning to hand over greater responsibility for some road maintenance to councils under a scheme to rationalise guidelines throughout the state. The idea is, though, that there'd be a corresponding increase in financial assistance offered to councils. But Hastings isn't convinced.
Now they've decided that, well, that's the recommendation anyway, that they won't be responsible for 71% of what they previously were. And you're adding hundreds of $1,000s to the cost of the people of the Hastings, and I don't think that's fair.
Mayor Ray Cooper says he'll approach the ministers concerned and the Local Government Association to complain that while other councils were represented on a committee which discussed the roads proposal, Hastings was not.
But it's not a truly representative committee, and we're again extremely concerned that decisions that are going to cost us millions of dollars have been taken by people who we never even elected.
Ironically, the minister assisting the Minister for Roads, who's also the local member for Port Macquarie, Wendy Machin, today announced increased road funding for that area. It includes $100,000 to be spent on the road between the rapidly developing areas of Laurelton and Lake Cat-Eye, and $50,000 for improvements to Hastings River Drive between Port Macquarie and the Pacific Highway. A spokesman for Ms Machin said the timing of the release has nothing to do with Hastings Council expressing its concern about increased maintenance responsibility.
Newcastle City Council recently approved a development application for an escort agency from 111 Maitland Road, Islington. Councillors took the unusual step yesterday of inspecting the premises.
I wanted to see what these premises were like, and I think the other aldermen wanted to see them. As far as I know, there is not an alderman ever been in one of these buildings.
Prostitution from an escort agency in New South Wales has the green light. However, because of a loophole in the law, prostitution in a brothel is illegal. Newcastle Police recently raided brothels in the city and charged about 20 people with prostitution offences.
What's happened, we've got a situation with the brothels where the police are closing them down on one end because of the legislation, and the council are actually approving them the other end because of the legislation.
Deputy Lord Mayor Frank Rigby says Newcastle Council will put pressure on the state government to change the law.
We're not going to turn this into Sex City or some such thing as that. What we want is some reasonable legislation so that everybody can do their job and we can keep these women off the street.
Councillor John Sutton says it's important that prostitution be legal in brothels.
I think there's universal support in the council for councillors to approach the state government to develop a system of legalisation that will result in the registration of brothels in a way that will help people to be protected who are working in that industry.
A spokesperson for the Attorney-General says the government is aware of the legal loophole and change is planned. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
New facilities were opened today for a methadone program beside Newcastle Hospital. The needle exchange unit will be transferred here in a month. But HIV specialist Dr David Sutherland says why close the old Newcastle West Centre if it's doing the job?
The numbers are there for people to look at, if you like, the runs on the board. Lots of exchanges, lots of people dropping in, and very little HIV in our drug users.
The Area Health Service says it's closing the centre down because the rent is too high. But according to Dr Sutherland, users won't be happy in Newcastle East, a much more public place, at the hospital near the police station. But a spokesman for the new centre says it will be discreet.
The access to the needle exchange is at the side of the building. We have down the lane down the side of the building, and it's after hours, and then the community health will actually be closed during that time. So I would think it's fairly private.
If addicts have problems, they can buy needles at their local chemist or phone the needle exchange for advice. The Area Health Service says it is looking to establish another exchange in Newcastle West in June. Peter Ryan, NBN News.